One of the most fun experiences that I had last year, as I previously mentioned, in 2019, was obviously college. Now, during college, I've learned a lot, especially during my senior or fourth stage. But usually it wouldn't come out that way, that someone would say, I loved the process of doing my research. But for me, it's an exception because I loved doing my research, especially because the subject that I chose was something that I loved. Besides that, my supervisor that I chose was someone that I loved too. That's why I want to explain a bit of the process of writing a research paper or any scientific paper in general. Now, the system that I used for my research paper was called the APA system. Now, this APA system stands for American Psychological Association, and they created this new sophisticated style of writing for scientific papers and journals and articles that follows certain criteria. Now, this system is very strict in the way the structure of a paper should be, in terms of the margins, in terms of the structure itself, how the paper itself should be divided. Now, I'm going to come into those details even further. As I said, this APA system has many variations because from now and then, every few years, there's actually a book which is called the APA Association, the Style Manual, that shows you what changes are made specifically by the APA to the way of writing any document that is written in the style. Now, obviously the style that I'm writing, I'm not sure from which edition or which year is it, but I think this is generally somewhat an idea of how the APA is in general, because the research that I did was actually about literature, not about linguistics. It was very simple, concise, and direct. That's why I wanted to show you the way that I did it. But I'm first going to start with the structure of it. So, okay, first things first, I would like to start with the structure itself. Now, this is my research paper that I did last year. And it's very short and it's very, very simple in its structure. But I would like to start from the beginning of how would you start to write your research paper. You would obviously need an outline or a plan, so you would write it. Now, from the beginning, I'm going to show you to this side, of course. I'm going to take some screenshots and add them to this side of the screen. It is very different from the way that we did it because the structure is simply, you would have the logo of the university, you would have the name of the country, region, the name of your university, the name of your college, and the name of your department, which is, in this case, the English department. Then you would have your title. The title needs to be bold. And then you would have this paragraph, which you should, I think, copy and paste because it's the same. You should just add and change up your name, the name of the department, and I think that would be it. Then, accompanied by, under it, the name of your supervisor, then the name of the year. Now, the first page, which is the cover or the title page, is very simple. But then, following that, we have the acknowledgement page. Now, the acknowledgement page is something very easy to do because you have to write this on your own. You have to dedicate and acknowledge all the people who've helped you. It could be your supervisor, your parents, your family, your spouse, and then add your name at the bottom right of the page. Now, yeah, this could be very easy thing to do. Now, following that, of course, now we have the acknowledgement page and we have the dedication, but I don't think you need to acknowledge and dedicate. You would just mash the both pages up and you would just do it as one. Why would you add another page just to simply write 2 or 3 lines? Now, following the page of acknowledgements, we have another important element in any APA system paper, which is the abstract. Now, the abstract, you can consider the abstract as sort of an introduction. Abstract has to be at least a page, which in my case I've written a page and a quarter, but an abstract is a sort of introduction or having a glimpse or an idea of what this paper is going to be about. But the abstract should answer 3 important questions. First of all, what is your topic? And in my case, which is the theme of death in the poetry of Emily Dickinson. Or it could either be like ing forms. The second question about the abstract should be, why did you choose this topic? Why does it interest you? Is there a reason why you chose this topic? And you can state your own reasons. And the third would be, how do you handle, or what is your topic? Like, how do you divide it? What are the sections? How do you analyze? How do you bring your own evidences and sources from books, journals, articles, etc.? Now, another element following the abstract is the introduction, which basically is restating the same information again. Because introduction is trying to do the same thing. It's trying to introduce you to the topic that is going to be discussed and analyzed, and nothing else besides that. But in my own point, because I did not know that an abstract should be too long, like 2 to 3 pages, I ended up dividing my abstract into the initial abstract and then into an introduction later on. But following that, after all these introductory elements, you would finally get to the heart of the subject, which is the actual subject you are dealing with. Now, in my case, my research was very simple because mine was poetry. Now, poetry is very different than analyzing themes in a book or doing a linguistic related subject, or any of that, because poetry is somewhat simple, because we were told to pick 4 poems by Emily Dickinson and analyze them according to the text, and that is what I did. I chose 4 themes and I simply just analyzed them according to what I read and what I understood, obviously accompanied by sources from articles and the net, obviously. But additionally to that, besides doing that, of course, we have, again, finally the conclusion, which the conclusion should be very, very simple. A paragraph of 6 to 7 lines, I think, should be enough, because you're trying to restate what you said during this paper in a very summarized way. Following conclusion is obviously the bibliography, or the sources that you have used, which is to somewhat the most difficult part about doing a research paper. But we're going to come into discussing that further. And now I'm just going to quickly explain some important factors when you come in the process of writing, how you should deal with the text itself. Now, obviously, as a clear example, I'm going to go to page 6 here. First of all, on every single page of the paper, you should have the running head, which is on the top left, it should state the name of the research, which in my case is The Subject of Death in the Poetry of Emily Dickinson. If your title is longer than that, you need to make it shorter, at least so if it's somewhat published, even if not in an article, people would know what the title of the research is. Now that's that. And concerning the font, the font should be Times New Roman, but other new versions have updated where you would use other fonts. But in my case, I just used the simple Times New Roman. The font size should be 10 to 12, but I think the standard one should be 12. And at the beginning of each paragraph, you would have to press I think it's the shift button on the keyboard, I'm unsure, so you would have double space. Unfortunately, my laptop doesn't work. Otherwise I would have just shown you how would you write it on the laptop itself. But only in one case where you would not leave that double space would be the abstract. Now when you come into writing the abstract, you wouldn't leave spaces at the beginning of the paragraph. But for the rest of the paper, you would. Not just the first paragraph, but the beginning of each paragraph you start after the abstract and up to the end. Now, that was that. And concerning the numbering, you would number it on the top right of the paper, but starting from the abstract itself, not from the cover page, that would be wrong, and not from the acknowledgement/dedication page, but obviously from the abstract page. That would be numbered 1. You have to find it out on Google because numbering the pages is a bit tricky. You need to learn that trick. But the abstract is considered page number 1, even if it isn't. Then you would go chronologically to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 until the end. Now, as I said, from the page 6 itself, now I'm going to come to citation. Like, how would you write a reference within a text? Now, this is called in-text citation. Now, in-text citation is basically stating the name of the author and the name of the year of publication, and sometimes even stating the page, which in my case I did, but I think it's extra. You just need to mention the author and the year of publication of the source you are using. Now, obviously, if you use a quote directly taken from an article or a book, you have to use quotation mark, and then an in-text reference would either start like, here I said the Emily Dickinson Journal, Volume 1, gives a clear meaning to what the king means. Then I start my direct quotations and I say the dying speaker's countenance and her last word will necessarily represent either Christ's presence or absence. Now, between two brackets, I stated the name, the surname or the last name of the author, which is in here, Yokman. Her name is obviously Claudia Yokman, but you're going to use the last name. And then the year of publication, which is 1992. But if the page is available, you can write it or no. That depends either on the supervisor, because it's up to the supervisor or professor to tell you, you can add this or you can remove that. Now, this was at the end. And it could also be mentioned simply at the beginning, like Yokman 1992. Or it could be either mentioned like Yokman brackets and 1992 between the brackets. Like, there are different variations. You just have to see which one fits better. Now, I'm going to come to the trickiest part of the research process, which is the works cited, or the bibliography or the references. How are you going to mention them during the latter part of the research? Now, this usually comes towards the end, as I previously mentioned. The bibliography, and I also forgot to mention the fact that each title of should be in the middle. Titles and the subtitles should be flush to the left. So remember, each title, before you start writing your paragraph, should be placed in the middle, and then the subtitles and the secondary subtitles and the third ones should be flush to the left, which I think varies from edition to edition. But anyhow, I just want you to take a look to page 17. I don't know why I said that. Kaufman, this is how you then restate what you wrote in the citation part in the research itself and turn it into a full reference where people would go into, whether it's a link, it's an article. Now the first one is an example of a link retrieved from online. Now see, Kaufman Alyssa, her name is Alyssa Kaufman, but you would first use the last name, a comma, then the first name. A coffin is a small domain by Emily Dickinson. This is the title of the article. Then, if of course it should be the year of publication and the place of publication, but here, because it's not mentioned, I already skipped to retrieved on. Now, if you have a link, you should say retrieved on, like a certain date, like mine was March 2nd, 2019. Then you would insert the whole link. So if someone later wants to check and visit it, they would know where you got it from. Now, for me, what else have I used? I'm gonna come to the one before last. I said Tiwari OP, comma, Khandai YA. Now, this is in the case of when you have two authors mentioned. You would certainly do the same, where you would mention the last name, then the first name, and that's the middle name towards the end. Death as a Mystic Experience in the Poetry of Emily Dickinson. This is the name of the article. Now, because this is a journal, I wrote Imperial Journal of Interdisciplinary Research. This is the name of the journal. And because journals have volume, you have to mention their volume 2, like volume 3, number 5. Then you would mention the year 2017. Which in this case, you could mention the year. It would both be right. Like you could mention the year after you have mentioned the name of the author, or which in my case would be later on. But I think either way works out. You can see that Hofner TC, because I could not stop for death. American Literature is also a journal, volume 29, number 1. I think the second example is actually books, because this is where I got the poems from. Ford TW, comma, this is the last name and the first name. The Theme of Death and the Poetry of Emily Dickinson, this is the name of the book. University of Texas, as you can see. This is the place of publication. Obviously the place would be Texas, USA. Then June 1959 could be here at the either beginning or at the last. Then Something Unnecessary, which is the name of the pages. Sorry, which is necessary, which is pages. Because I did mine the other way around. So here, page 136 in this case. But anyhow, this is simply because when you have one author, it's simple. When you have two authors to cite, that's simple. Because when you have more than 3 and 4 and sometimes up to 20 authors, that would be just simply, like mentioned, the first name, the second name, and then it could easily be written by writing it al, like et al, al dot, which means etc., etc., and other unmentioned authors. Yeah, that's how now citation is actually very difficult thing to do, and it's very tricky for some to write the citation part, but this, because my research was simple, that's why the references that I used were actually simple. Yeah, and that's it. Hopefully in another video I will talk about the differences between a literary research and a research about linguistics.